Good morning. I'm Jim Druckman, President and CEO of the New York Design Center. I'm thrilled to introduce today's program with my friend Martina Mondadori, Editor-in-Chief of Cabana Magazine, and artist, designer, and columnist Luke Edward Hall, who I feel like I already know from reading his column every week in the Financial Times. Today's conversation marks the kickoff of a wonderful partnership between the New York Design Center and Cabana Magazine. Today's conversation, together we look forward to exploring the most interesting aspects of design, art, and the intimate relationship we have with interiors as only Cabana can do. And now, without further ado, Martina and Luke, welcome and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks. It's great to see you, and it's great to be here today. I know normally we would have this would happen in person in New York, but I think this will do for today. I'm very happy to be here with Luke today. And I see he's in a very interesting, Luke, where are you? You have a great background and room behind you.
I am at home in London in our flat, which we're actually doing up at the moment. We're making some changes because we've sort of been in the country, for quite a long time, and then we suddenly got back to London and thought, wait, we need a project again, so we're changing everything. So it's looking nice this way, but like the other way, there's like piles of clothes and books, and but we're getting there.
It's but this is the perfect background. And so is this part of the renovate? Is this a new room? I mean, new in...
Well, it's our, we have a little flat, tiny sort of flat in London, and we're just changing it up. We hadn't done anything in a few years, and so we've put in a new wallpaper here in our bedroom, and we've had a 4-poster bed made, which I'm really excited about because I've never had a 4-poster bed. And that's nice.
I had my first one done too in my new apartment in Milan, where I'm sitting in right now. And it was my dream as a little girl to have a 4-poster bed. And it actually took me 40 years to get one.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, taking me like 32 or something. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like a little prince or something. Sort of, but I was really like, look, if we're going to do it, we should just like, let's go for it. So we've actually got, you can kind of see it here, but it's missing its curtains. So we're getting kind of, David Hicks, sort of 60s. We're doing a kind of straight pelmet, and curtains matching the wallpaper. So it's getting finished off next week, which is really exciting.
And is it, as David Hicks used to do, is it hanging on the ceiling directly, or?
Okay, you know what? Like you can kind of see. No, I wanted to do that.
And it is an actual 4-poster bed. Yes, it looks amazing.
But I wanted to do the hanging from the ceiling thing, and I spoke to about 5 different people, and I don't know, it got really complicated because we have actually got quite high ceilings here. And it got quite complicated working because I mean, they're amazing. I love when it's just like the little chains connecting to the ceiling. But also this is, I suppose, quite nice because we can take it with us,
yes,
whatever we do next. Not that it's that portable, but
Yeah. But so actually looking at this room, which you just did, and thinking about the sort of title of this panel, which is "The Past is the Future of Design," it makes me think that maybe it is. I mean, you went for a wallpaper on the walls, a 4-poster bed, a wonderful, very sort of cozy green. What do you think about? I mean, obviously you are very much inspired by the past, but you're one of those people who are able to translate sort of past inspirations from the past and make them feel extremely relevant today.
Well, I mean, I was, thinking about this, I think it's very natural for us, for designers, to look to the past for inspiration. I mean, design doesn't exist in a vacuum. And I think that, I always think of the past as being a sort of treasure chest that you can dip into. And, and I like to think of my work as I'm very much inspired by the past and kind of various kind of periods and types of art, furniture, history, but I like to take inspirations and then try and create work that feels contemporary. And I think that's what we all try and do, really. You're taking, you might go around a house and see a detail on some paneling or something, you get inspired and you make something new. And I think it's not enough just to be inspired by it. I think you then need to go on and kind of do something new. And I think for me, that's what I try and do. And maybe it's through color or
So what do you think is, I mean, I feel that with design process, very often the kind of idea moment, the idea moment for something new is sometimes very hard then to kind of, translate into a process. It's that intuition moment. But do you feel that it's, in your case, is it adding color or using certain colors, because you go really bold with colors? I mean, whether it's, on your collage or in your rooms, or I know you have a new adventure down the line, which you announced yesterday on Instagram. So what is it for you that, I mean, what do you feel is it probably color? Is it?
I think it's a lot to do with color. It's also taking, because most of my kind of like the heart of, I do kind of a sort of complicated mix like you do a lot of things, and I'm often like having to sort of like think about, okay, what is the heart of my work? And I think it's the drawing and the artwork. And so for me, it's also a lot about, like, often maybe I'll see historical references, but then I'll recreate them in my line drawing. So it's kind of line drawing, it's color, collage, it's a real mix of things, really. But I mean, I read this really interesting interview with Alessandro Michele the other day. Obviously, we love Gucci, we love it. But he was sort of saying how it's also, he often also throws something unusual in as well. Like, there's lots of these historical references, but then it's about, you throw something unusual in and it kind of completely changes it. And I think that's what I try and think about as well, is often, you have all these historical references, but it's not always as simple as like you see something, you take it, you reevaluate it. It's like maybe you're looking at something historical, but you're also listening to a contemporary like pop song or something, and you kind of, it's like mixing all these things together to create something new, and you don't quite know what's going to come out. But
it's like with ingredients, with the same ingredient, you can actually create a different recipe, and just by adding something else. But it is true about, I remember Alessandro once, I think for one of his first collections, the title, the sort of logo on the invite for the show was, what are we going to do with all this future? And it made me think, because, and then you arrived in his, in the space, and the set design of the show was extremely inspired by, by sort of vintage interior decoration. And yet, and yet also his shops and his collections, which are, have even a very, very clear kind of reference to, for example, Tom Ford's Gucci, feel relevant to today. They don't feel like old. And I have another question. So you, a little bit like me, but you and Duncan, so it's a very creative couple, the two of you. So in your shared spaces, your house, your flat in London, your house in the country, how do you decide? I mean, how does that conversation happen? And then where is the line drawn?
I think we're pretty lucky in the same with you, I think, as well. Like, I think, we both love art, design, history, and we kind of do similar jobs. We're on the same page. And I think that even though our work is similar in some ways, it's also very different in lots of ways, but we have the same references, or even if we don't have the exact same references, we get each other's references. So we always know what the other one is talking about. And, we have quite obscure, like we all do, I know that he'll get it if I'm like, oh, remember that shell grotto in that book that we looked at 5 years ago? Like, we have the same things. But then I think what's fun about doing it at the houses is it's a collaboration, and we don't really work together. And people always say, do you work together? And I'm sure we will at some point in the future. But what's really nice is actually, like, the flat and our house in the country are the places that we kind of get to work together. And actually, that's a big part of your life, is decorating your own homes. And it's really fun. And I think that we both love the same stuff. But there are things that he loves, and I maybe don't like so much, or I love that he doesn't really like.
But there's some arguing going on. There's always are younger.
Yeah, don't you think?
Who picked who picked the bright blue? I mean, I've just seen pictures by Miguel Flores Viana actually, but who picked blue for the kitchen in the country? That's very bold and a great idea.
Oh, the blue cabinets?
Yes.
Oh no, oh you mean do you mean the one here with the pediment on top? The cobalt blue
In
one?
London, or is it in the country? I don't know where it is. I remember seeing pictures on
You mean the
Instagram.
one with
Yeah.
the, like pediment,
Yes.
big pediment?
Yes. Yeah.
We did that together. We knew that we wanted to do. We love green, which you can probably see a lot of here. And we for the kitchen, we were like, okay, we need to do something that's not green. And we both love that really intense blue. So we have a lot of fun. And then what's also, I also have a little studio in the country, so I can if I can like shift anything that Duncan's not so sure about into my studio.
That's your space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I love working. I mean, I think when you both are interested and passionate about decoration and collecting and stuff, like it's really fun because,
Yeah.
you just love it.
And does your taste of, I mean, I hate the word taste, but does it evolve over time? What the way you look at things, the way you then translate it into your creative process? Does that, have you seen that change over time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think don't you think, I think it's sort of interesting that I think when you look back, there are things that you have always had. Like I've always loved color. I mean, and I remember I made a fanzine, a magazine when I probably told you this before, but when I was sort of like 15 or something, and my dad would photocopy it at work, and then I would give it out like a fanzine, and I've still got copies, and it's very collagey and it's very colorful and very eclectic. And so like it's funny looking back at stuff that I made when I was young, and there are still like strands that run through. But I think in terms of like what you're interested in and taste, like I think that's totally changing all the time. And I look back at our house maybe 5 years ago and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't do that now, or I'd change that. But I think it would be weird if that didn't happen. I mean, do you find the same, that you're like always, because you're always looking at new stuff?
Yes. And I think you also clear your mind about, I find that the way I would, do rooms, but even through Cabana, you kind of, the process, it becomes clearer where you want to go, how you want to do it. I mean, when I look at the first few issues of Cabana, obviously, we didn't have budgets, so it was very different, but it's kind of, my vision was always there, but then the way you execute things changes.
Yeah.
Which makes it an interesting journey because it feels different the whole time.
And I think it's weird, I mean, I think all artists and designers, to be honest, I think everyone that I know that does kind of what we do or similar looks back at stuff they've done before and they think, I would change that, or I would do this different. And I think it would be kind of weird if you did. I mean, obviously there's stuff I look back at now that I still love, but there are also things that I'm like, oh, I probably wouldn't do that. I would change that now. But I think that's because you're always evolving, and it would be weird if you wasn't. And I think also, you have like little moments where you're like, I'm really interested in grotto furniture, or I'm really interested in, whatever. You go through periods of being obsessed with one thing in particular.
And maybe have your references changed? Meaning, what about, let's take past decorators. Or maybe you kind of, with your favorite ones, you go, you look at, because they all have different phases in their career, right?
Yeah.
And that they all changed. I mean, they always, were loyal to their style, but things would change and would evolve probably over decades, or
yeah, of course.
Very often probably depending on the interaction with clients. But
yeah, exactly. But like the same thing as we were just talking about, yeah, I'm sure, all designers, yeah, of course, I look back at as well, had their own phases of being interested in one thing. But I think pretty much actually the interior designer, there are people that I, like David Hicks, Dorothy Draper, Madeleine Castan, like there are people like that who I've kind of like always kind of been really fascinated with since I've been working in interiors, because that came after I did fashion design at university. But yeah, you're always picking up new influences, aren't you?
Absolutely. Sorry, I just came up with a question, so I'm writing it down as we speak. So there were two things I was curious of asking you. So I think there's an incredible, I mean, I'm obviously Italian, but I consider England my second home. I've lived there for years, and I always say that Cabana was born out of my nostalgia for Italy when I moved to London, and my discovery of my new home, which was England. But I think there's an incredible correlation between, you know, antiques, meaning literally, you know, antique markets, antique shops, and England and English decoration. And if you think about some of the great English decorators of the past and some of the present, they were all great antique dealers as well, which is something that I feel happens only in England. What do you think the connection is there? I mean, I know you are passionate, you're passionate about sort of flea markets and antique shops and.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think, yeah, I mean, you're right. I think there's definitely that kind of history of people like Christopher Gibbs and Peter Himwood and like Robert Kime, obviously still here, but Peter, you know, same. But I guess it's a real thing, isn't it, of these people who were mostly, I suppose, actually antique dealers, but then did decoration as well. I don't know. It's interesting, but you know, it's funny. I mean, I was in Florence recently, and I kind of was like, oh, you know, there's going to be loads of great antique shops. I've been going to Florence for work a bit, but not really spending much time off. And but I was surprised that there wasn't like, I imagine there'd be loads of sort of junk shops and things that I could rifle through. And I was speaking to someone and they were like, yeah, it's kind of because Italy doesn't really have that history so much of like antique markets. And they said it was something to do with, I guess in England, maybe there was the Victorian era middle class, like things got made and then they became antiques, which didn't really exist so much in Italy, perhaps.
I think Italy is a country of artisans and England of antiquity. And you see probably, you know, I mean, look at the tradition of decoration in Italy. You get Mondadori was all about craftsmanship and design, you know. Whereas, as we said before, all the sort of a lot of the great in England were actually antique dealers. But there is this culture in England, especially in the countryside, which is unbelievable. I mean, all the tiny antique shops and junk shops, and then flea markets and bigger ones, and they become even like a meeting point. I mean, you bump into people, and I found that sometimes the people you meet in you know, at antique markets, whether they have they're selling, whether, you know, the people that are, you know, stopping at the same stall, they're all so interesting. They're so quirky and eclectic, which I think is what makes England so great.
Well, that's what I think of. I mean, when people ask that question, what do you think, what is English design to you? Like, what is, and it's hard to explain because I think it is a sort of, I just think of, when I think of classic English design, for me, it is that like eclectic, slightly eccentric approach. Sorry?
Slightly eccentric?
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Oh, very eccentric. You know, and that to me is classic English design.
Yeah.
You know, and I think actually, I mean, maybe England is more famous for that kind of style of interior in a way, the more kind of like collecting antique, you know, because I suppose, yeah, you know, even like John Fowler and when I think of, you know, Nancy Lancaster, it was a lot to do with collecting furniture and you know, painting furniture and that kind of thing, and obviously the amazing rooms at the end of it, but it's very much to do with the actual furniture in them and the antique.
Yes, and the antique rugs and you know, I remember talking to Robert Kime, and he said, you know, I always start a room with a rug, and then where it all starts. How do you start a room? Do you have a way, or it's like depending on which room it is, or?
I mean, I think the way because I always think that's really interesting that Robert Kime does that. It's really fascinating because everyone has their own sort of way. I think for me, it's usually about like a particular pattern or a color. So with this room, for example, we really wanted to use this this wallpaper, which is sort of you know, this which is a Pierre Braconnet, Pierre Frey kind of black background. You know, I just loved it and was like, okay, we have to, you know, that is the starting point. We'll do the walls and we'll do the bed. So it's usually the pattern, or it's like, okay, you know what, I really want a yellow room. I really want to do a hallway in yellow. So I think it's for me, it's definitely usually color or a particular pattern. But then I know everyone has, you know, different ways. You know, some people start it with art, don't they? They have a picture and they build around that. What about you? What do you normally do?
Well, I think it's really about a mood, but very often it is a pattern, or very often I collect bits and pieces of antique textiles.
Yep.
So, you know, it might be that I have enough to make 4 big cushions for a sofa, and then the whole room starts from those cushions because they're kind of, have this antique
Yeah.
piece of fabric, or it's just some sort of, color exactly, or texture I have in mind. And then I find myself often like imagining rooms that actually will never happen. And sometimes I do. I'm not a designer, but I love creating kind of mood boards and rooms that never will be. But it's just so great to let your imagination go.
That's the fun of it, isn't it? I mean, I think you're right as well. Like, I think often it's like about a mood, or about, like with this apartment, we are very much like, because we're mostly in the countryside, we kind of, our thought was like, we want to come back here and it to feel like a really cozy hotel room. I'm very sort of, we kept calling it Palazzo Camden. We live in Camden, in like scruffy Camden, but we've made this like little palazzo sort of situation, cozy, because it's only like 2 rooms basically. But I think it's often about, you have in your head how you want to feel in a room, don't you? Or
yes, I think as you say, and it takes time to finish. When I bump into people and they ask me, "Oh, so is your apartment done?" And I always say it's never done. It's always constantly keep adding, and then is by living in a space. That's what I always say about the houses we feature in Cabana. And I remember once I was asked, how do you style the rooms to make them feel, to make them Cabana ready? And I said, well, no, it's not about the style. It's never about the styling. It's about the editing before, the sourcing, the right rooms that actually have that, layering or soul, really.
It's not faked at the end. That's just how they are.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to ask is, actually, I feel there's obviously a very strong relation between great interiors and artists. So very often I find that some of my favorite rooms of all times were actually artists' homes. I mean, obviously we think about Cy Twombly.
Yeah,
too,
interesting. Yeah.
But I think about Balthus, and I mean, we can, but even someone like Schnabel with color was unbelievable. Yeah. So I think it's also, I mean, I'll ask you what's it about? And obviously you're so, maybe it's about the way you see color and you associate it, but it's also about proportions and just being bold about it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think it's fascinating, isn't it, really? I mean, I think, one of my favorite houses ever is Charleston Farmhouse, in Sussex, which, Bloomsbury Group, love, huge fan. But there's something I think really fascinating seeing, because artists, I guess, the boundaries are kind of broken down. And like, that's very much what Charleston is about, in that, Vanessa Bell, Duncan Grant, they lived there, but they, and they have their artwork on the walls and on easels, but they also painted the headboards and painted the wardrobes. And so you have this like crazy, amazing, like breakdown of art, interiors, decoration, which I just think is so inspiring. And I think that's what what is so fascinating about seeing how artists live, and artist studios as well. I mean, it's just seeing the kind of like behind behind the curtain and how it all works. And that's why Charleston is great, because you have the amazing house, you also have the studio, which is kind of the studio. It feels like a living room at the same time as a studio. It's just magic.
You know what I'm drawn to right now, actually, you're mentioning artist studios, is working places. Obviously there's always a soul there, whether it's a craftsman studio or an artist studio, or a garden room. It's so interesting to me right now. I mean, that's what I'm after.
Oh yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So we have a question.
Something,
Exactly. Yes.
Like a scrapbook in real life, or I don't know.
Yeah. And you do scrapbooks. I mean, I've seen.
I do. I've sort of been like a bit lax with it recently. Yeah, I've got boxes of like things that I need to stick into books, but I don't know when that's gonna happen. But
famous to-do lists. Yeah.
A loose scrapbook.
And it says, we have a question. What decorating rule do you love breaking?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I think, because I think, it's tricky because I'm always sort of like, look, I don't really have any rules, because I think that, decoration has to be completely personal. I think often those rules about colors, I always love, because I'm so much about color, there are all those funny rules about what colors go together. And it is really interesting and fascinating when you look at the kind of the classic, the color wheel and which colors work together. But I'm always really excited about breaking that and kind of putting unexpected colors next to each other. So for me, yeah, definitely kind of the kind of color thing. What about you? What's your?
Well, I think one of the great rules of decorating is sort of symmetry. I'm a classicist by sort
Yeah,
of nature, and I look at, obviously, all of Italian architecture is all about symmetry.
yeah,
Uh, but in decoration can be great. You have a room, you have the windows, you can have a fireplace and two sofas or whatever. But that's what I sometimes just love breaking. You just mess things up. Or
yeah,
while, I found myself maybe creating a symmetry to begin with, and then while you live in the place, you end up breaking all those rules.
yeah.
Um,
It's hard
um,
when we live somewhere as well because, like, you always find something new from in the market, or you bring something home and you mess up your little arrangement that you've made. But it's like that's the fun of living and collecting, and your home is forever changing, isn't it? I suppose, which is
yeah,
how it should be.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's what makes it so interesting. And I think it's also what the pandemic has probably, taught us. And a lot of people, I mean, we were obviously interested in interiors, very interested in interiors before, but I feel a lot of people, obviously, having spent so much time at home and having the home become their, school, when you have kids and your office and, your social life and everything, then you want to redecorate, or you even want to, even by changing, again, your cushions on the sofa, the room
Mm,
feels different. So I think we've all learned to appreciate, decoration and interiors even more now.
I think so. Yeah, and I think well, I mean, I think even in the past few years, there's been this a much bigger interest. I think definitely down in a big part to Cabana actually, but like there's definitely been a bigger interest in interiors, shifting away from other things, and I think the lockdown just exacerbated that even more. And I think people are just really, yeah, like you say, realizing the importance of having a home life that not only is a place to live, sleep, and all of that, but that stimulates you.
Yes. And I think there's another thing about great interior decoration, which I feel it's very often kind of, overseen, but it's the sustainable aspect
Mm,
related to interior design. Because when you think about something that is entirely handmade, take, for example, I'm sure you follow some of the participants on this webinar might follow on Instagram, San Patrignano, the wallpaper
ah,
place in Italy, where every single wallpaper panel is entirely sort
oh
of
my God.
either hand block printed or hand painted. And obviously, that kind of process takes a much longer time than,
Yeah,
the ready-made thing by the meter. But it takes longer, but it also lasts for, and everything, when you think about adding antique pieces to your interior, and those pieces are maybe, have lived in others, have a story, bring a story with them,
yeah,
and are sustainable just by the fact that they've, lasted for so long.
yeah,
Um, and it's the exact opposite of, I don't know, in fashion, fast fashion, or when you get a great 1970s Yves Saint Laurent blouse, which I love collecting. The quality is amazing, you still wear it today, it feels relevant. It's that aspect of sustainability.
it's funny you mentioned the wallpaper because that's what we've done in the bathroom here. The made in Sicily, right? Is it made in Sicily?
It's not Sicily, it's
No.
central Italy, and actually in a very sort of artisanal
Hmm.
area of Italy, in Emilia Romagna.
But is
Yeah.
it the same one I'm thinking of? That's like the boiserie style, like kind of wood.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yes.
It's so beautiful, and yeah, like I love learning about that kind of initiative, and it's just great. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, that's what I every week in my column or whatever. I mean, it's probably like sort of saying the same thing over and over again, but I'm always just saying, you know, look, we should be buying old things. Go to your junk shops, go to your antique shops, because like you say, it's that what could be the more sustainable than that is buying something old, giving it a new home. It has amazing character, and you're not buying something new, which doesn't mean you can't buy new things, but I think it's about the right mix. And when you do buy new things, buy things that are going to last and you're going to love for a long time.
Carry over with you like your bed.
Yeah.
So before we end this, I wanted to ask you about your new project, Chateau Orlando, if we can say something about it. I mean, you announced it yesterday on Instagram.
Yes.
And it's fashion / it's like your new brand or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's basically sort of, you know, I was sort of not, you know, I wasn't thinking about making a brand. I mean, I've made things in the past. I mean, I've made things in the past and sold them. You know, when I first started out, I was experimenting with making cushions, and, you know, I did fashion design at university. I've sort of experimented with bits and pieces. I mean, now I'm mostly focused on my artwork and my interior projects, but in the back of my mind, I was sort of like, God, it would be fun. It could be fun to do something, setting up a brand. And anyway, I'm working with this company. We're doing it, starting with knitwear next year. Very small collection, really small, but knitwear, like jumpers, cardigans, things like that. A couple of throws, but really fun. I just felt like maybe there was a gap in the market for. I mean, you're you know, you're filling it as totally as well with you know, with just doing things that are colorful and uplifting and have a story. And, you know, we're working with a really nice factory near Venice. Everything's made in a really nice way.
That's also an incredible aspect of suddenly going from just being an editor or an artist and making and seeing these things made, is the relationship with people who make these things, I think.
Yeah, it's fun. And, you know, I'm sort of doing the whole creative visual side of it. So I'm, you know, literally kind of like drawing the knitwear patterns. I mean, I've never made knit. Well, I did at university, did some knitting, but you know, I'm like painting the patterns and collaging them on Photoshop and then like giving them to a knitter, hoping that they'll be able to be translated. It's very like analog, which is really amazing. You know, it's very handmade, the process. So it's really exciting. Yeah, I'm excited.
Oh, I can't wait to see it. I think, you know, we were told, I think half an hour, which, I mean, we could go on for hours, I think, but yeah. But thank you so much for doing this with me, Luke. And
it's so nice to speak.
Yeah, and I hope to see you very soon.
Are you in Milan?
I am in Milan now, but I'll be in London next week. We're sort of launching the
book.
Oh,
of course.
Contributed to, which I have an advanced copy here.
Oh, amazing.
And Cabana. Yeah. So I'll see you next week.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. And send my love to Duncan. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And yeah, I mean, these things always feel like Luke and I are alone in a room talking, but I know there are quite a few of you there who've been listening, and I hope it's been interesting enough. And well, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, Martina. Bye-bye.